Now, I would like to introduce our next panel, which is Transcending Boundaries. I would like to welcome the moderator of the next panel, Mr. Asad Lalji, to the stage. Asad Lalji, the CEO of Avid Learning, which is a public programming initiative and creative platform under the SR Group, and he is also the curator of the Royal Opera House, Mumbai. Prior to relocating to India, Asad worked for 14 years as one of the Mad Men advertising executives on New York's Madison Avenue. Asad has transformed Avid Learning into India's leading cultural hub through international collaborations and partnering with the biggest platforms in the country. Since the restoration of the Royal Opera House, Asad's curatorial programming has re-established its reputation as the city's cultural crown jewel. He is also serving on the Kala Ghoda Association's executive committee and the advisory board of the Mumbai Urban Art Festival 2022-2023. Please welcome Asad to the stage.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this discussion on transcending boundaries as we commemorate and celebrate International Museum Day. I'd like to thank Joint Secretary, Ministry of Culture, Ms. Mukta Sinha, and our very dynamic team for this opportunity to moderate this discussion with the new age museum founders and directors. To begin, if people know me, I like to quote some stats before I start the discussion. Let's look at some museum statistics. As per the 2020 UNESCO report, there are an estimated 95,000 museums worldwide. Out of these, 65% were located in North America and Western Europe. The following year, in 2021, UNESCO reported an estimate of 1,03,842 museums, 60% in North America and Western Europe. It's interesting to note that this changed in a year after COVID-19 pandemic, an increase of 8,842 museums. Just like every other industry, COVID-19 affected the working and functioning of museums and art spaces. For instance, some museums embraced digital, taking their entire collection online into the virtual realm. According to the International Council of Museums, ICOM, after COVID-19, 76% of the museums have been rethinking their digital strategy and to increase their online presence and online engagement. Now today I heard a quote saying India is a living museum by itself. And according to an Intact report, the number of museums increased from 746 in 2009 to 833 in 2013. And I was happy to hear from the Cabinet Minister this morning that we have approximately 1,200 plus public and private museums. And I think another quote today I learned, 145 of these museums were started in the last 9 years. Today, museums are a lot more than repositories of artifacts and forgotten histories. They're archives, places of research, reflection, and some are the cradle of the future developments incorporating the best of science, technology, engineering, arts, and maths, STEM, to encourage and explore critical thinking, provoke deeper reasoning, and ensure an enthralling visitor experience. In the last few years, museums have given voice to memories, re-engaged with the public's individual identity through stories, and have become living libraries of human experiences. Some have evolved into participants, others into change makers of environmental consciousness by becoming models of sustainable heritage and centers of learning about what it means to be eco-friendly and highlighting the potential ramifications of climate crisis. Today, museums play a much larger role in the evolving cultural landscape. This brings me to our discussion that you've been waiting for, Transcending Boundaries, and I'd like to invite some of the leading contemporary museum founders, directors, cutting-edge cultural practitioners who are pushing the boundary of what museums can be in the modern world. Through their innovative approaches and forward-thinking vision, these pioneers have been reshaping the museum landscape and redefining the role of museums in society today. So, put your hands together and welcome Director, Indian Music Experience Museum, Bangalore, Prima John. Hey guys, come quickly, we are going to start our panel. Founder, the 1947 Partition Archive, Dr. Gunita Singh Bhalla. Co-founder, Tram Art Trust and Museum of Ordinary Objects, Choiti Ghosh. Founder, the Human Library Mumbai, Anjali Qureshi. Ideator, the Museum of Possibilities and member of the Disability Rights Alliance, Vaishnavi Jayakumar. Founder and editor, India Memory Project, Anusha Yadav. And founder, Museum of Memories Project, Paulomi Das. You know, it's such a pleasure to be moderating this discussion, and since we have 7 leading voices, I'm going to request my wonderful panel to keep their answers short within this time frame allotted, so we can go through a couple of rounds and then turn to audience question answers. Is there a time? Oh, there's one missing chair. Oops. Just in the interest of time, we're going to start. If I get a chair, great, otherwise I'll just hang out here. So my opening question to our esteemed panel, in terms of your current work, could you elaborate on the concept of museums breaking free from convention and illustrate how institutions exemplify this approach and how you transcend boundaries? And I'm going to start with Prima first. Let me just get your slide on. Wonderful. You are a cultural producer having worked across disciplines with a focus on public presentations and reception of art on several national and international cultural projects, and as the new director of the Indian Music Experience Museum, a premier institution devoted to the history and the development of music in India. You know, I've had the pleasure of collaborating with the IME, and I think it's one of the coolest new museums that have come about, so you guys must go visit in Bangalore. So the question to Prima is, the IME is India's first interactive music museum featuring multimedia exhibits, a sound garden, several performance spaces. Can you discuss the process of creating these interactive and immersive exhibits, and how do they enhance the visitor's experience of Indian music?
Hello. Hi. Thank you so much, Asad. It's a wonderful, wonderful experience being here. And I was telling some of my colleagues, I've been here since the morning, and it's the first time in my career that I have seen an expo of this scale. In fact, I think it's the first event of its kind where museum professionals and arts professionals are coming together. So I'm very, very excited and happy to be here. Very happy to be part of this panel of wonderful women, and very happy to be representing the Indian Music Experience Museum. We are India's first and only interactive music museum. The vision of the project is to introduce audiences, especially young people, to the depth and diversity of Indian music. The history of Indian music goes back about 2000 years, and what interested me in this project and why I have joined the IME team is because there is no institution like this that is looking at music in this kind of an institutional context. When you think of museums, you essentially think of primarily visual art spaces, but to take an ephemeral form like music and something that is so wide and deep in Indian history, and to encapsulate it into this institutional structure, and to be able to work to make it more inclusive, diverse and accessible to a different public. IME is built on a completely digital platform. Majority of our exhibits, 70% I would say, are digital interactives. What the digital format allows us to do is to be able to present very, very complex concepts, especially those in Indian music. If you see Hindustani or Carnatic music, concepts like raga, shruti, tala, in a very simplified, accessible format. It also allows us to have a lot of depth and complexity, and able to present vast amounts of knowledge in a smaller space. To give you a sense of scale of IME, we are, as Asad said, broken up into 3 major components. We have 9 galleries, which are made up of high-tech multimedia exhibits. We also have a sound garden, which introduces visitors to the concept of sound as science before it becomes art. So we're looking at vibrancy, frequency, resonance. We also have a learning center, which is where we impart music education to people of all ages. But IME's focus is primarily on young people, and which is why the IME Learning Center is not just a space where we teach music education, and IME is not just a space where we expect visitors to come, see and go. We're also trying to inculcate the future of performers in India and also a new wave of supporters, art aficionados and connoisseurs in India. So I think that gives a good sense of our work.
Wonderful. I'm going to come back with many more questions. So moving to Gunita, the 1947 Partition Archive is a crowdsourced, community-based archive that trains and empowers citizens to preserve and share oral histories of partition, including digital copies, photographs, documents, images of personal objects, and stuff like that. You know, Avid had the pleasure of working with you a couple of weeks ago in Bombay, where we launched your book. But how do you engage with communities and encourage them to participate in documentation and preservation of partition history? Because, you know, partition happened like 75 years plus ago. And so there are very few people in that age group left who can actually share.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a primary vehicle for our work has been, for crowdsourcing, has been social media. It is work that is enabled by the age of social media. And how do we encourage young people and get them to want to talk about something that happened 75 years ago? Well, I think we try to ignite their curiosity. We try to speak to their curiosity because even though this happened 75 years ago, it's something that affects everybody today, yet that hasn't really been articulated very well in their education, in their formal education. And so it's like a missing piece, it's a mystery. And when you kind of frame it that way about, you know, something that they need to discover on their own and learn more about, I think a lot of people are very interested. And there's also an activist element in this, that it's, you know, our lived history, our ancestors' history that has not been told, that isn't found in our books. And I think that's a huge motivator for people to want to get involved, because it gives them, you know, a desire to change the future. It gives them more control, it gives them agency to do something about it. And also just, you know, how we frame, how accessible we make the concept of oral histories, basically.
We'll come back to the book later, I guess. Joythi, let me get the slide going first. Joythi, you are a multifaceted creative personality with an object theatre practitioner, puppeteer, actor, singer, writer, director, all rolled into one. Sorry, someone gave me this. You're the co-founder of the Museum of Ordinary Objects, extracting ordinary objects from everyday life and placing them in a democratic museum setting. I think we interacted last 4 years ago at a panel at the NJMA. So how do you go about selecting the ordinary objects that you showcase in the museums, and what is the criteria to use to determine their value or significance?
Hi. Okay. Yes, it's working. We were just talking about this on our way here, about the meaning of the word curator, and whether, as the organizers and holding together, people who hold together the Museum of Ordinary Objects, are we curators at all? Because what we do is that when we go into a community space, we give a brief or an outline to the people about what this museum is about. We give a guideline of how to tell the stories, but we never reject or select object ourselves. It's the community and it's the people who follow the guidelines once they have an understanding of what this museum is about, what it is trying to do. They select their own objects, they select their own stories, and what we do is pedestalize the ordinary, but keeping them accessible at the same time. So we don't ever select or reject.
this morning, for those who are here, our Honorable Prime Minister did mention that each one of us should collect our own objects at home and create little museums of our own, because 4 generations later they'll be very significant. So I use the word cultural producer. It's easier versus curator, just me. Anandali, you're a trained engineering management. You were on sabbatical from the listening and conversing with those whose stories are simply waiting to be shared. So how do you identify and select individuals to participate as human books, and what kind of stories have you featured in the Human Library Book by project?
Thank you for that, Asad. And yes, I did go on a sabbatical, and I think the sabbatical was primarily for me to understand what really connects to my soul. And I really couldn't find something that would help me motivate myself every day when I go to work. I mean, each one of us, have to earn our bread and butter. At the same time, I think what really had me riled up was that we didn't really connect at a human level. We all are educated people. We are all there. We are, in a space where we can, improvise our lifestyle day in, day out. Still, there is something which is lacking in all of us, and that of human relationships. And with that thought, I actually came across this concept of a living library, and it just led me to, research a little more, and I was really charged up. Imagine having somebody, a stranger, and you think there's nothing common between you and the stranger, but when you hear the story, you find that there are so many common chords. And that moment, when you realize that, you connect with the person at a very invisible, strong human level. And that's actually what got me into this entire concept. And for me, it was a task. I didn't know where to go. I didn't have a direction. I was sitting honestly in my house on a sabbatical without a paycheck coming in. I did have something in my savings, and I decided to just use social media. And I put myself out there that this is what I want to do. Anybody wants to help me out, connect. And I was floored with the kind of love that I received, the messages and interest, and that's when it triggered. And I picked up my human books basis on stories which I to come out. So it did involve a lot of work. It did involve a lot of meetings. It did involve a lot of hand holding, but that's what got me there. So we've covered a number of stigmas and taboos which are present in the society. It could be occupation-based, it could be sexuality, your lifestyle, religion, anything and everything possible is present in the Human Library.
Wonderful. I've got more questions about the various editions that are planned or maybe planned.
Yes, please.
I'll come to that. Get the slide going first. You're going to be next. Vaishnavi, as an active member of the Disability Rights Alliance, you've been closely associated with designing and the functioning of the Museum of Possibilities, a platform for people with disabilities and their family and friends. It's an evolving facility working towards a more accessible world. Hope I've used the right term so far. How do you envision the future of universally accessible spaces, and how do you see museums of possibility contributing to this vision?
So, firstly, I wouldn't restrict our target audience of the Museum of Possibilities to people who are disabled and their circles alone, because one thing which we've always struggled with, as far as inclusion goes, is this whole thing of us and them, and that can only be broken when groups come together, and that's something that most of us have been deprived of, because how many of you who are not yet disabled or who are non-disabled have had a schoolmate who had a disability, or a colleague who has a disability? And there would be very few. So when we're talking about universal design, really we're talking about things, spaces, education, anything really that can be used by the maximum number of people. To give you an example, a low-floor bus is definitely an advantage for a person who's a wheelchair user, but also helps people who are elderly, people with balance issues, pregnant person, little children with school bags, etc. So it's not just a facility for a disabled person, it's a facility for everybody. So it's more like expanding the scope of products and ideas and facilities and services that are available to include that many more people. Where do I see it going? Well, hopefully a lot of the ideas and the human library bit, that was again one of the things that we wanted to incorporate, because we feel that really speaking, understanding comes only when you really know a person and experience even third hand what a person is going through, and that kind of learning is crucial, and we hope that the Museum of Possibility will be that space. Today happens to be Global Accessibility Day. It's actually Global Digital Accessibility Today, and I came across a quote which really made sense as to what we're trying to do with the Museum of Possibilities. The quote goes like this: it's like technology for non-disabled people makes life easier, but for disabled people, technology can make life possible. And that's what the Museum of Possibilities is all about, of expanding our vision.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that quote. Anusha, you're the founder of the Indian Memory Project, a visual and narrative-based online archive that traces the histories and identities of the Indian subcontinent, where photographs are found in personal archives. We've known each other over the decade and our paths have crossed quite often. The Indian Memory Project is not just about preserving history, but it's also about fostering connections and relationships. Can you speak of the way your project has helped build communities and bring people together?
Yes. These are very exciting stories. So there are things where people have traced ancestors from 6 generations ago, mainly because there was a name, and that was now, it was Googleable. And so they found somebody's name. There are people who found institutions that have been set up by people in South Africa. There are people who have found descendants, aunts, uncles, gym instructors. I mean, you can name the kind of things that have been found. And the thing is that I don't, the beauty of a project is that you just don't know what to expect. Because I am an accidental historian. I learn with the project. I don't, I'm not otherwise an academically trained historian. And so it's just that when all of these connections started happening, that was very exciting, because this is not, again, an unexpected consequence. And that is, I have had experiences where the grandchildren are not talking to their grandparents, and that happens a lot because you are in the madness of youth and you just do not want to waste your time talking to an old grandparent sitting at home. But the moment the grandparent's story is online and it turns out that they've led a very exciting and event history of their community, is when suddenly the grandchild, who is now on Instagram, discovers that my grandmother is actually very cool. So then they have re-established a connection and relationship with them that was not there before. And they've done it all on their own, and mainly because of social media has played a role, because it is your peer pressure. It is what the young people are looking at, since history is now cool. And so therefore, my grandmother was this cool person. And this is just one of the many examples. I mean, people have discovered not just their people in their own families, but also people in other people's families, discovered things, backgrounds of their people from their own community they did not know. or the possibilities and the kind of lives that people have led. I mean, the beauty of a project like this was, it is nothing like we thought India was, or the subcontinent. It is completely the opposite of what movies have told us India was like, or is like. And that is something amazing.
Thank you for sharing. And to our last and final panelist, Paolo Meek, the Museum Memories Project was launched as an immediate resolution to the problem arising out of the pandemic. For people who are unable to reach museums or heritage sites and the collections being locked for indefinite times. I remember that I got an email from you sometime at that point with a video or something that I was supposed to send you my coolest museum I've been to, and I started doing it but I never finished sending. So I owe you an email. But so how does the Museum Memory Project, how can it help bridge the gap between museums and the communities they serve?
Thank you, Asad. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me on this panel. Thank you, Ministry of Culture, for this concept of an expo. And it's the fact that it's called an expo and not a conference makes it immediately accessible to a lot of audiences. And the Museum Memories Project is a sort of younger people whom I also teach liberal arts and design schools, who were messaging me and asking of some way to get them out, because a lot of them live in difficult homes with some degrees of violence. According to the World Health Organization, the largest number of people with depression are in the 18 to 24 age group, with the largest number of suicides. So for me, museums are a space which are more than just displays and some beautiful lighting and air conditioning. They are places where there are numerous stories that can be told. And I've been working for museums. I was I was the research and curation head for the Bihar Museum in Patna some years back, and that's what we always have tried to do, is to get museum objects out of the boxes, out of physical boundaries. And Instagram was there, thankfully. So what we all did during the lockdown was to get up in the morning and just look at Instagram. So I thought, there are only two things I know are museums and Instagram. I used to be quite Insta obsessed for a long time. So why not connect the two? And I made a small video, and that's the first time I was going behind the camera and turning the camera towards myself. But there was so much that we did during the lockdown. That was for the first time. And we did start getting responses. In fact, when I'm saying we, I have a team of extremely young people, most of them designers, heritage planners, and people who have studied heritage management. They are in the age group of the mid-20s, and it was their idea to go beyond just Instagram. So we have a website, we have a YouTube channel, and we are trying to break the physical boundaries of a museum and ask anyone anywhere in the world to send in their whatever memory they have, good, bad, ugly, of a museum they've visited, because museum visitors are not heard. If you would be aware from your own experiences, there's going to be a complaint book at a museum, which honestly most people don't look at. I mean, I have worked in a museum, I know. And it is sometimes impossible to address those. But are we, when we are curating exhibitions, when we are designing, modernizing, spending crores of money in a country like India where our resources are limited, even thinking of what the visitor actually wants? So the Museum Memories Project has turned out to be a free resource tool. We have about 100 memories on Instagram. We have about 25 to 30 on our website. And 85 memories are there. So any school, college in the world can actually just turn to our Instagram page and look up these memories, and then they get to know of the larger museum collections across the world. So it's not limited to a physical state, accessible, as Vaishnavi is saying. It's for all, right? And we try to figure out multiple ways of connecting to younger audiences, young, old, as Anusha is saying, cultural creators to empower people and learn to empathize through these artifacts and the stories that are being told by just somebody who's a commoner.
Most of the interesting part of it, Asad, is that most of these memories are not of museum artifacts. But people are writing about the cafe that they've visited or something they bought from the shop, or they've just gone and visited a fort or a castle, that's it, you know, which is fine. I mean, I think we have to step down from our ivory towers and be humble and accept that, you know, as museum professionals who design, make, create museums and exhibitions, we have to understand that the entire experience and space is important. Right? I guess that's what we plan to do.
Thank you. I know we were talking to the Crafts Museum earlier and everyone talked about Lota there. So I get where you're going. Prema, design and architecture are integral components of a museum's identity and functioning, which shaping the visitor's experience, etc., etc. So what is the role of a museum's architecture and its correlation with aspects like sound, spatial design, and operations in creating a more memorable experience for visitors? Because yours is an experiential museum, and a new one that...
So IME actually is an institution that has been built ground up. It's not a museum that is housed in a pre-existing building. So this was a space that was designed specifically for the purpose of being a museum. And the building, the architecture, the design, the sound, the performance spaces, and like Bolombi was saying, the cafeteria, all the other ancillary spaces are an integral part of how a visitor feels when they come into the space. At IME, the building has been built like there was an architecture competition in Bangalore, and it's a Bangalore-based architecture firm called Architecture Paradigm that has designed the building, and the building has been designed like sound waves. So before sound starts, there is a vibration, there's resonance, and then there's sound waves. So the building actually mimics waves, and it follows, and it's a continuous flow. So it's a narrative that starts in one gallery but doesn't end till you come back to the same gallery, but at a different level. And what it is trying to emulate is the ebbs and flows in a narrative. So the gallery sort of opens up, and you're looking at, for example, contemporary expressions, and then that slowly moves into Hindustani and Carnatic classical music. But before you go into the next gallery, there's a narrow space, and it's almost like a contemplative dark space where you're sitting and thinking about, oh, what did I just see? So those kind of elements in architecture really help visitors experience a space in a completely different way. IME is also designed to be a space that's very accessible. It's not meant to be daunting, it's not meant to be alienating, it's meant to be very, very welcoming. So the color palette for the museum is extremely colorful. So it's completely grey from outside, but when you walk in, it's a very, very vibrant, colorful space that you feel immediately comfortable in. And these elements make a lot of difference in how visitors access the space. And for us, music is a community experience. And you should be able to experience that with your families, with your friends when you come in, and be happy in a space like that. The depth or the complexity of the information is not lacking. It's just the kind of medium that you're used to give that information that is a little bit different. And for us being a music museum, sound quality is critical. So that is something that we do spend a lot of time perfecting.
Thank you. In the morning of the keynote, Emmanuel talked of the Louvre Abu Dhabi, and I was talking to him later. Jean Noel, he designed that, and also the Qatar Museum. These are all relatively new museums, and the designs are just amazing for people who are, architecture junkies like myself. Gunita, so can you share your experience of running oral history workshops, which you have offered since 2012? You have turned over 7,000 individuals into oral historians over the course of this decade. In fact, when you were at that session we did together in Mumbai, a friend of mine signed up, and she met me this week, and she showed me a certificate or an email certifying herself as an oral historian. So,
so the experience of teaching those workshops. We started teaching those workshops actually a little bit earlier than 2012. We worked with professional oral historians in figuring out how this whole thing works, and then condensing it into a workshop that anyone could attend and learn from. And so in this way, we started teaching workshops in person. They used to be a full day. For an online workshop, we started condensing it down to 2 hours, and then there was some self-study that people could take if they really wanted to do this. And so actually, it turns out that if people want to record one oral history interview, they need to spend about 10 to 14 hours, including the prep work, for an interview that could be about an average of 2 hours. But some of these interviews that people are turning in are actually 10 hours long, so they've talked to their subject for multiple days. But I think what happens, what really, really draws people in is what you guys, some of you guys have talked about, especially with the Human Library Project. It's that connection. It's really addictive. So when you sit one-on-one and someone is confiding their life story with you, you naturally form this really deep bond. In fact, I have friends, close friends now, who are in their 90s and over 100, because once they've recorded their story with me, we've developed this bond, and it's, you know, it spans age groups. And so I think that element of it can be a huge draw for a lot of people, and once they've experienced it, they go out and they tell their friends, and their friends want to do these workshops. There's a lot of word of mouth that's going on here.
I know a very good friend of mine's father came to visit you after he had worked with Divya Malik.
Yes, yes, that was really special actually. He came all the way. Right.
So I think, you know, the Museum of Ordinary Objects is a temporary exhibition that's showcasing various locations. So in your experience, what is it taking museums to different spaces? I know it's a pop-up in a way, but how do you adapt it to fit different environments, even though it's crowdsourced or open source?
It's not so hard, really. What's important for the Museum of Ordinary Objects is the space that we create the museum in is as ordinary and as accessible as the objects themselves, as the stories that the objects tell. So it just doesn't work in
Give us an example of one of the
spaces that we've been to.
And just the story.
Okay. In Delhi, our Delhi edition ran in a space called Studio Safdar in Shadipur, which is primarily a migrant community location space, and it has a mixed demographic. My favorite object from that, there were two. One was an empty plastic Baskin-Robbins carton, which was collected. There were about 450 objects that were donated by the community for that museum, and the story that accompanied that object was, "Yahan pani ki bahut kami hai," and just that. That empty plastic throwaway carton told us so much about that community. There was another one which is quite different from this particular story. It was a set of letters that was written by somebody's grandparents when they were married and separated by partition between Lahore and Amritsar. They wrote letters to each other which they could never send, really. So both of them kept those letters, and when they were reunited many years later, then they exchanged those letters with each other. So it's really a very wide range of stories that talk about history from very personal point of views, and stories that talk about contemporary, everyday cultures, everyday living. These are not big voices of history. These are very small voices of history. And the building, how the museum is set up has to reflect that.
Thank you. I think you need to start collaborating with Gunita and Anusha for those letters. I think give it another opportunity to be seen and heard. Andali, you know, the act of sharing personal stories can be empowering and also vulnerable, you know. So how does the Human Library ensure the safety and well-being of your human books and the listeners involved in this exchange of personal stories? And the second part of that question, you know, I think it's very cool, the Human Library concept. You know, I mean, why did you choose this construct versus a traditional archive? I mean, I know this started in Denmark, and you know, you took the rights for it from India or Bombay, I'm not quite sure, but I guess you're starting it in different parts. So why choose this particular format? It's very interesting, and how do you protect the stories?
Yes, so very interesting. how do I, the thing is, when I started this off, Asad, I realized, even within my own very close-knit circle, I knew of individual stories and I knew that they were inspirational in ways beyond words. And for me to create a space, see what happens is, it's very easy to probably meet and just discuss anything which is happening in the common space with somebody close to you. But when something is so private, you need to create that space which is supporting the person to share the story. Now, this is exactly what I did with Human Library. The space that was created was extremely neutral. I made sure that the person who's a human book, I never put out their identity outside. So if you look at Denmark, what they actually did is they would put the face of the person out on social media. I wouldn't do that. Even if their picture goes out, nobody knows what stigma they are representing. So I made sure that the stories which are going out are not identified with the name of the person, unless the person is comfortable putting it out there. And you'll be surprised to see that after 2-3 attempts of being in Human Library, they all feel so empowered that they don't feel it's anymore a need to hide. They want to come out and they want to share it. In fact, I've had a lot of human books who've gone out and created helplines, who've actually gone out and created their own social entrepreneurship where they're actually going and helping people who go through the same issues themselves. So that's one thing, that how I managed to maintain their identity a secret. I never gave them names, like Mr. So-and-so. I actually called them by the stigma. So if there is an alcoholic, he would be presented as an alcoholic. I wouldn't give his name as Mr. Blah Blah. No, I would just avoid that. And what happens is very empowering, because next time onwards, if somebody calls him an alcoholic, he won't really feel offended by it, because he knows I am that and I accept it the way I am. So that's one thing. And how do I make sure their integrity remains to the story? So I've probably curated about 98 to 99, not 100, maybe a little short of 100. And they are not documented anywhere. Because these are private stories, these stories are only known to me, and there is this kind of trust that they have with me. Now that remains. I mean, it's just, I think, a personal rapport here. That's how I maintain. And they're not documented anywhere, so they know that it's safeguard. Now, out of the 10 elements that they share with me, I pick up the ones which I feel are very crucial that the society needs to know. So they would be sharing some part of it, maybe not entirely, but that again is basis my personal rapport with each one of them.
I've been involved with the Kalagura Arts Festival as an advisor. So at the Kalagura literature section this year, there was a whole event on human libraries where experts were there and people came and talked to them. And I believe we spoke about TEDx earlier. They're doing human libraries as one of their icebreaker sessions. So
Right.
I think it's a very powerful kind of a construct and very, very, I think, interesting how it can evolve.
Yes,
not
absolutely.
just for...
It's intimate and it's very safe for the people who are in. So yes.
Thank you. Vaishnavi, tell us more about your Live, Work, Play module and how it is implemented in the Museum of Possibilities.
It is. Yeah. So let's remember that the Museum of Possibilities is located within the campus of the Disability Commissioner in Chennai. And the only amount of space that we had was, like 2,500 square feet. Of course, we expanded a little bit and managed to get a cafeteria on top, which is accessible. But why we were keen on covering these three domains, I guess the architect was inspired by that book. What is it? Something, Eat, Pray? Eat, Pray, Love. Yeah, so I guess this was another three-word thing, but it means so much more in the context of, you see, with what we are trying to do with accessibility and persons with disabilities, we have not moved beyond looking at disabled people as consumers. So, for example, if I was to say, is this place accessible? Is this exhibition hall accessible? They would say, yes, it is accessible because a wheelchair user can come and sit in the audience and go to the toilet. There's a wheelchair accessible room, etc. But this really kind of struck home when we were doing some other advocacy with the Chennai Metro Rail. And we figured out that while the public space of the metro station was fully accessible, more or less, anything apart from that, the staff space, the service space, etc., wasn't. So we were like asking them, what's going to happen if you have a, disabled colleague? What about the whole working element of that? Shouldn't we be moving more from just a public space to other spaces as well, working environments, and yes, most important of all, playing, recreation, etc. So these three sections have, different, products, ideas for people to try out. So it's not just, this is the stuff that I need to live. It is also, this is the stuff that I need to work. So let me try out this latest screen reader. Let me try out this latest, gadget, which because of my disability, I now need to use a headband. And with that headband, I can point at various parts of the screen and I can still communicate. I can still work. And it's that kind of opening up of minds and opening up of possibilities that is key over here. To give you a small example, it also hosts, in the play area, so that people always messing around with, some tactile games, blind chess, the usual things, but small things like just some loose papers in which kids can scribble, except that when you grew up, you probably had a coloring book in which not a single thing that you had to color in or a person you had to color in had a disability. But there are these coloring pages by an NGO called Ekansh, which have, children with disabilities, with other children, etc., doing things which are, whether it's playing Holi or Diwali or celebrating something or in a classroom, playing along with other kids, and just that simple thing of coloring, whether it is for a neurotypical child or diverse child, it helps with that understanding that diversity is life.
Thank you. Anusha, the Indian Memory Project is a digital archive accessible to people all over the world. Now, you've been doing this since 2010, but technology has changed. I'm not saying going from the 2G to the 5G we're at right now. So how do you look at the role of technology in cultural preservation? You can talk about AI if you like.
Well, I could, but it's not. It's very boring right now because everybody's talking about it. So I don't know. I wouldn't even dare comment on how technology has helped or not helped other institutions, but it has certainly helped Indian Memory Project. It would have not existed if there was no WordPress platform that was available free to the world, which is constantly being developed by invisible people sitting around the world in their rooms coding free plugins and making it better and better and better and better every day. It would have not been possible for it to spread the word the way it did without Twitter, without Facebook. I would have not had access to so many people to nag them to send me photographs and stories if I had not had Facebook. So every step of the way it has. So, and also the thing is that there is in my design and marketing experience from the past, is that I'm keenly aware that social media is like advertising. It is meant to create awareness of something available. It is not the product itself. And for that, you need to build an archive that is outside of social media that can hold its own. What happens if Facebook dissolves tomorrow? What happens if Instagram gets bought over by somebody else? Then all your work that you've done is just gone. So you have to make it independent. And so I did that very early on. Within days of, I just took it out of Facebook. I said, there is no way this is going to exist something. But yes, the technology goes hand in hand. It still does, and the thing is that I need to keep every 3 years. I need to redo the website. The entire portal and the archive needs to be redesigned because it needs to be easily searchable. It needs to be, the databases have to be, I mean, this is all technology jargon, but I love technology, which is why I like to even make sure that how is it that I can keep it relevant. And then I've already, and this is something that is maybe slightly off topic, but I have already parked a certain amount of my earnings so that when I die, somebody else can fund a website for it and keep it alive. So, and this is because to think ahead.
I wasn't going to go to legacy planning, but good you brought it up. But hopefully you have a few more years to go.
Yes, hopefully yes. But legacy planning is something I'm involved in now, and so I like to think ahead.
So the technology question was good. Moving to Paolo May, earlier this year you gave us a fantastic curated tour of Astad Debu's retrospective titled Breaking Boundaries. Again, it's kind of similar to this topic, which offered an immersive experience showcasing the compelling story of his life through the arts. Now, could you share your approach on curating this exhibition, which was almost like a museum-like approach? And what are the elements or strategies did you employ to make this so comprehensive and engaging? Because not only his artistic journey of portrait, but it resonated with visitors on a deeper level. And if I remember right, you never worked with him or met him, right? And I had. So.
Okay, so I'm extremely jealous of that fact because I loved Astad. And I have learned dance my whole childhood, and I one day aspired to meet Astad. So his family, when they approached me through some designers with the idea of, it was his last dream to put together an exhibition which spoke about the importance of contemporary dance in India and how he tried to take it to a different level. And I usually, when I take up any project, I go so deep into it, I sort of dive deep into it because there are multiple dimensions to anything and anyone. As I was talking about museum artifacts also. So all of us here would have a very different interpretation of anything that we're looking at, even for the panel that we are here. So try to maximize on the levels of interpretation and stories. And the more I learned about Astad, so I read everything possible that was available, not just on the internet. This was a COVID project. And anywhere, anyone, I started talking to people. So there was a designer, the Jade designers, Monica and Karishma, thank you. And then Ashdeen, who worked with him, Archana, of the owner of Bandej, who worked with him, different designers. He worked a lot with people who were marginalized, through the Salam Balak Trust. So those people, his collaborations with Manipur, the young dancers, the gurus, the classical dancers. So there are multiple parts of his personality that started coming out. And when I presented my first idea of the exhibition to Astad's family, they were very surprised. They were quite taken aback because I said, when the visitor enters the exhibition, they are entering knowing Astad Debu as a contemporary Indian dancer who received a Padma Shri. By the time they leave, it's like going through a prism, There are multiple aspects of his personality that need to come out. He changed his dance form when he was teaching the blind children and or adults, and later, or also when he was teaching the deaf and dumb. So I paced out the exhibition like his own dance form. So he had this 8 beat pattern that he followed. So the entire exhibition is in 8 parts, starting from his birth. But then after his birth in Navsari and his childhood in Jamshedpur, when he comes to Mumbai rather it was Bombay then, for his college, there is no chronological aspect that's followed. So like his dance, you just, as a visitor, would keep going from one part of his life to another, keeping it with the music and dance.
The reason I even asked you this question was it's such a well-hung show. I mean, it was so interesting and interactive at so many levels that, and we were fortunate enough to have you to take us through it. And ironically, Astad's last public big performance was with me at the Royal Opera House.
Just keep repeating that.
Very sad. But I'm going to go to Prima with my next question. So, according to the Museum Tourism Market Outlook report released by Future Market Insights, the museum tourism is estimated is at the moment about 20 billion in 2022, and it's projected to reach 35 billion by 2032. Museum tourism, and I think some of it was spoken about in the morning. So, how do you, as a director of a new museum, keep pushing the envelope to kind of stay fresh, stay new, innovative, and to get repeat customers and to build those footfalls, because those footfalls also pays part of your funding. A small part of it, I assume, but it also does.
I think for any institution, whether it's online or a bricks and mortar institution like IME is, we put our work together so people can come and see it. So visitorship and increasing visitorship is always on our minds. Just to give you a sense of the kind of visitorship we've had at IME so far, we opened in 2019, late 2019, just before the pandemic, and since we've opened, we've had about 170,000 visitors. And keep in mind the pandemic years, we have an average of about 3,000 visitors a week, which is a very healthy number, we feel. I think it's also important to not just look at pushing numbers, but also look at the quality of experience, as Asad was saying, and also repeat customers, to put it in a marketing term. The idea is not for people to come once, and also most of our institutions are not set up, most of our projects are not set up to be experienced, sampled once and then you get it. No, artworks, art, any form needs repeated visits. You engage with it differently depending on what's happening in your life, what you've been able to access. So that is one way that we get many people to come in. On an average, I would say each individual would have to come back to IME at least twice to really get into the depth of knowledge that there is. To keep people coming, we also do special exhibitions. We've already done one on Pandit Ravi Shankar for his centennial celebrations. We've done one on bird song, which is looking at the contribution of birds to ecology and our cultural wealth. So these exhibitions also help us bring children back in, audiences back in, and of course programs. We're a performing arts institution. So on an average, once a month, twice a month, we have concerts that we do. And through that we have more visitors coming in, and it's a very, very large community. Feedback forms give us a sense of the kind of visitorship that we have and where are these people coming from. From the data that we have collected, still about 70% of our visitors are coming from Bangalore. Only 30% is coming from outside of Bangalore. So that's one area that we're hoping to work on in terms of getting more people in.
So now you have two new museums in Bangalore. You have yourself and MAP 3, which is the science one. Yes, lovely. So I think it's a plug to be one of the go museum hopping in Bangalore.
Going to 4 very soon.
Which is the fourth one?
It's still in development. It's a technology-based museum.
I know, I've heard of it.
Yeah.
So I think, the Ministry of Culture has embarked upon an ambitious project of digitizing the collections of the Indian museums through technical expertise from the Center of Development of Advanced Computing and Art Institute Chicago. And they've got some fancy standardized software called Jatan. So just from your perspective, in what ways can museums adapt to changing social and technological concepts to remain relevant for the future? Is the future digital, physical, online? I'm going to open that up to others also, but we'll start with you.
I would hesitate to speak generically and speaking in specific context of our museum and how the digital is in India and what we found out, particularly during the pandemic. The internet is still, it's not a equal egalitarian space always still. It's like a lot of spaces, it's about who has access and who can. For a museum like ours, and we tried a digital version of it, it changes the nature of it and it just doesn't work. For the Museum of Ordinary Objects, it didn't work.
Fidgetal. Alright, Alisha, do you think you'd ever take your archive and make a physical museum out of it?
No, I would not. I don't think it would work. Number two, it costs too much of, it's taxing on...
Pop-up?
Yeah, pop-ups I have done already. We've done, actually we did one in Godrej, we did one in Serendipity. Before that I did one in South Africa, I did one in London. We've done pop-ups, but it's not something...
So next edition you do one here?
But, I'm not interested in a physical space at all.
You know, this question is for the whole panel, but I'm going to start with Vaishnavi. You know, museums are, to some people, some parts of India are daunting and unwelcoming. They're very elitist, right? They're catering to different audiences, different age groups, different age brackets, from different people who have disabilities and people who don't. How do we go about, I'm just going to use an example of the Royal Opera House. When the Royal Opera House opened, it's like this, fancy Baroque building with red velvet and gold. It was very daunting. To welcome everybody from all walks of life in was a challenge. So how do you go about democratizing the physical construct of the museum?
So, in a sense, that's kind of made it easy for us because we already have a population, a very mixed population of people who visit the campus because they've got work with the government. It's a government space, and the Disability Commissioner is the person to whom you come with all the problems that you have, the grievances that you have. So you get people who come in from, all parts of Tamil Nadu. So, for one, I would say the only, kind of probably daunting space would be the cafe because, well, you don't get your vada type of food. You get more bread and, more Western kind of food. But really speaking, you have the beach bang opposite and you have the beach snack vendors. So if you really want that food, you should technically speaking be going out there and eating it. So, location-wise, I think it's good because we already have, let's say, a captive population of people coming in. It's become a kind of place where a lot of school kids, a lot of, let's say, occupational therapists, let's say physical therapists, they come as part of their academics and to expand their knowledge, etc., etc. But as far as walk-ins go, also, it's pretty uniquely located because it faces the Marina Beach in Chennai, which has so many different kinds of people visiting at any point of time. Diagonally opposite the Museum of Possibilities, you have perfect example of play or recreation. We now have again a collaboration with the government funded, etc. We have a beach path in which a wheelchair user or let's say a crutch user can go right up to the water, which is something that people had never been able to do all this while, and it supports different kinds of people. So even you have elderly people clutching onto the railing and kind of plodding down to enjoy the waves, etc. So we do get in people from there as well. And just a few 100 meters away, you also have the Santhom Infinity Play Space, which is a space which has, let's say, some amount of, let's say, sensory aspects like, fragrant smelling plants, plants which, kind of feel different. The leaves are velvety or spiky, etc., which a blind person would, a blind child would be kind of interested in. It has a space, like stepping stones, etc., for a child with, autism to, check out. It has tactile, features. It has, the biggest hit is the wheelchair accessible merry-go-round. So there again you have children, and all of this is almost like a triangle. So you do get a bunch of people who are coming in, and we also have events. So if somebody is, releasing a book on, let's say, children with learning disabilities or their experiences with a disabled person, etc., they have it at the cafe. And if, somebody's come up with a new kind of, let's take a new motion wheelchair, a particular kind of new and innovative wheelchair which can transform people's lives, this is the place where you demo it. This is the place where you launch it. So you get, people coming in again like that. So apart from that, it's pretty friendly because of the equation. So it's not uncommon to find, in the parking lot, people who could be, let's say, playing a wheelchair game called Boccia. He was pretty severe disabilities, cerebral palsy, etc., who are able to play this game, and that is such a natural, kind of hook to get people in and say that, hey, look at that person, he's able to play this game of Boccia, of direction and hitting, etc., by using, he can't use any of the limbs, but he's able to use, kind of pipe and push the ball. And I didn't even know such a thing was possible, and that kind of brings people in. So.
Thank you for that. Today's International Museum Day, and the theme for 2023 is Museum Sustainability and Well-being. So how can museums collaborate with other stakeholders like local governments and non-governmental organizations to promote sustainable development and community living? Anita, do you want to talk about collaboration with governments and other local bodies?
Yeah, for sure. So we collaborate with a lot of different types of stakeholders. We collaborate with art groups. We collaborate with libraries or word archives, so maybe that's not a stretch. We collaborate with universities, with a lot of history students, with high schools, with younger students. So for us, collaboration is really key because 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. You can actually, it's almost emergent, something much bigger can come out of a collaboration than what the two of you can do individually, and even that added together. So collaboration is very, very key for us.
Paolomi, collaboration?
Yeah, we already have, and we are always looking for collaboration. So we have something called Museum Musafir, where we request museums from anywhere in the world to request their staff, who are not just curators, but even gallery attendants, security guards, to talk about 5 artifacts or memories or spaces of their museums, so that it increases connections, emotional connects, not only with future visitors, because that's a very big issue that we have in the world, but also to give recognition to groups of people who are otherwise unrecognized. There must be so many hundreds of people who are working behind the scenes for this expo itself, and none of us know them. The Museum Memories Project also, because we, in the 3rd year of our establishment, we have now 5 people who are our expert advisors, whom we are calling the Jadugar experts, because museums in India were always called Jadugars or Ajaibgars, and we are trying to sort of, maybe being over ambitious, but trying to bring back some magic in museums through the project. And one of our experts is actually here, Suyash, who's a young designer. He has worked, Suyash, raise your hand please. Suyash is a young designer who's worked a lot with the queer communities during the lockdown. And we were actually, we had a long 3-4 hour meeting yesterday, and we are planning to do something for the Pride Month. So yes, of course, collaboration.
So he's a Jadugar with a part of your team?
Jadugar, he's a Jadugar, he's an expert advisor.
Welcome, Jadugar. Anjali, collaboration?
Well, Asad, for me, in the work that I do, I think I will have to expand my boundary here. It wouldn't be just with the
Aren't you looking at different cities?
I am. I've already done that. Yeah, but in terms of the objective that I have is to build a culture of empathy. It would entail me to reach out to far more organizations and not just government-led organizations. So we worked with, for example, Bombay Stock Exchange. We worked with corporates. We worked with very small little companies and communities specifically, where we can bring this change about in the mindset of people, in trying to inculcate the fact that untold stories are powerful agents of change. So we've done that. So I think for me collaboration is key, but somehow in my case, human library alone on it's standing tall on its own feet. So Yes, and collaboration is going to take it from over. Yes.
Thank you. So, I mean, this is about pushing boundaries, transcending boundaries. You all are the path breakers in this space. And I know a lot has been written about. There's a lot of AI hate going on right now, but I seem to be a little obsessed by it because trust me, it's not going away. When photography came out a century ago, the purists hated it. Photography is not gone anywhere. When computers came out, people said, "Oh, my jobs will go there." Nothing is gone. So, AI is here to stay, and whether we like it or not, what we're reading right now, and I'm doing a talk on that next week, actually. But how are museums using artificial intelligence, and is AI the future of museums? Who'd like to take this one? Or I can go. I'm just kidding.
I'd like to comment on AI. See, the thing is that with anything, any new technology or anything that is new, you just know how to channel it. How do you use the technology? The technology is there. The code is not there. Everything is being learned. But how do you use it?
So I'll give you two examples.
Yeah.
So in 2016, a museum in Paris created a robot called Bernison, and the robotic art critic that quietly wandered the museum halls, and this robot had bowler hat, coat, and a scarf, and he would actually go and this is my research, and it's not me. He could record people's reactions to the work of art, and in turn develop his own taste in becoming a critic. The Tate partnered with Microsoft to do an engagement program through AI, trying to build their audience engagement. People like the Tate, the MoMA, all have new media departments. And I'm not talking about NFTs because that's quite the hated topic also. But even that, I mean, there are departments being created by all these museums to look at that. So AI, anybody? Continue, sorry. I'll give one
How is it going to be used? And in museums, they're going to use it like a lot of other organizations are going to use it. They're going to use it to scan reactions. They're going to use it to what is being missed, what is being looked at. It's like data collection of human behavior through a crowd. What object is being looked at, what is not being looked at. I mean, I'm not even going to go into translations and audio to video and all kinds of other things that can be done. You can use AI for a lot of things. It is just that how is it being used, and is it being used for the benefit of human race? In the end, technology is to benefit me. Otherwise,
there is a panel, I think, in the Jodel program. They're talking about museums in the metaverse. So I'm actually very interested in that panel. But Punita, you want to say something?
Yeah, so I can say a couple of things. First of all, I think AI does have potential for a lot of danger, and that needs to be addressed. But anyway, there's a lot of potential for really cool things. In relation to our work, we have 11,000 oral history interviews. It would take a human lifetime to go through all of that, and still you wouldn't retain all the information. Our brains are limited, but the AI brain is stronger than billions of human brains put together. So it can look at all that data and help you interpret it, I think, in ways that we cannot do ourselves. So we can augment our own minds to be able to sift through this historical data, because our human minds are limited and cannot do it. But then again, there are the dangers that need to be addressed, which there's a lot of people
never make for a great interviewer. AI can never replace human beings when it comes to.
Oh no, I don't mean that. I mean the interpreting. Yeah.
Generally, whenever I prepare for my panels or I do my speeches in the Avid programs, I always, just for fun, do it on ChatGPT, just to see what's coming back. So I chat with Chat quite often. But you were saying something?
Yeah, I was saying that, I'm a little divisive on the topic of technology, and because I primarily feel that museums are meant to have a personal experience, right? And I think technology is really helpful. I can't deny that all of us are here today because we've used social media and we brought it to our advantage, and that's how we spread a particular message across. But technology should not overshadow the actual message that the museum wants to convey. I think I'm okay with it. Otherwise,
technology is making that message more engaging, more relevant, because you have to think about your stakeholders, your museum going audiences are growing younger. They're born with technology in their hand. I mean, they learn this before they learn to read. Honestly.
Yeah, that's completely. And I was thinking about it. The younger audience to be completely immersed in the concept of arts and culture needs to be definitely worked on. So for them, particularly this.
The gentleman from the Louvre, he gave an 8-point program, Emmanuel, and there was one statement he said to educate the gaze. And what they're doing at the Louvre is for children to build their, and I go into detail before I understood this French accent, was they're incentivizing kids with products if they answer or they look for things within the art in a traditional way. So you're educating the gaze and you're using technology as an enabler.
So, sorry. So the way I look at technology is that it is making a lot of information accessible to people who earlier did not have access. You just need you don't even need a fancy smartphone, right? So sitting in any part of the world, in any remote area, whatever language you speak, even if it's sign language, through technology we are today able to connect. And AI, of course, like definitely. But again, I totally agree with what Anusha is saying, that we have to understand the implications of it. Most museums in the world have a social media, digital, marketing, etc. departments. If we talk of India, we don't have. So we are way back in that. And technology is not about LCD, LED screens and something flashing here and there. But it has to be studied before it is, the pros and cons of it, and in tune with cyber laws and everything before we take that final plunge.
I suggest people go check out the expo. There's some wonderful exhibits out here. It's quite very well thought through. Do you want to say something?
Yeah,
or can I...
on this aspect, one of the key purposes of the Museum of Possibilities is also to inform. So it's not just like, where do I get this mobility aid, or where do I get a particular screen reader, where do I get this particular device for my aging parent. It collects all of that information. It lets you know where all that, where to get what and approximately how much it costs. Now, of course, there are also professionals who help out. There's a speech therapist, there is a physiotherapist who, kind of helps you make those decisions while you're trying out or just experimenting with things. But there is a lot of routine, where do I get this and how much does it cost and who is selling that. And that's the kind of information which can get really tiresome if you have a very small team of people. And this is something which could so easily, take over that aspect of it, which is so key, but...
Yeah, just to add to the conversation about AI, I think museums are civil society institutions that have a very big responsibility. And when and AI is a new kid on the block, and it was NFT perhaps 2 years back. And I think we have to take a pause and say, and I think I agree with my co-panelists, that you have to look at the ethical concerns, the moral concerns, what does it actually mean in the realm of music. AI is now composing music, and being somebody who is a director of a technology-based museum, I'm not dissing technology. I'm saying that it's an additive to our experience as human beings, and there is something to be said about community experiences, collective effervescence, and experiences that we do as human beings together, which AI cannot replace. And also to bring in AI into an institutional context, I think it's the time to have conversations about it. I think it's the time to have discussions about it, but not perhaps to start implementing it in our spaces.
We have that conversation happening on Thursday at the NGMA in Bombay, so do come if you're around. But honestly, besides that, just one other thing what AI can aid in is your engagement. It's going to get you the right target. It's going to put it in the hands of people who want it, to know the information that they can come to you. So I'm going to just start wrapping up because I want to open it up to a few audience question answers. So this is the final round, and I want you to open your bags and remove that crystal ball you'll have, and do some future gazing, and just take a minute each to kind of talk about some, obviously the experts here who have been pushing the envelope and doing it really well. What do you see the future of museums and museology, the new trends? I won't go to technology, we already covered that. But the role of museums in society and how it's going to change. So, start with the
I started working in the art sector just about maybe 10-15 years back, and I started working in a museum, and just to see what that experience was like then and where we're sitting today and having this conversation, it's a sea change. in what is happening in terms of museum culture. And I'm speaking specifically of India, because originally it's a concept that came and was given to us, and now we're really embodying it and making it something that's our own. So I think the future for museums in India is extremely bright. Like I said, they're very, very important civil society institutions, and I'm glad the amount of work that private institutions, companies and individuals are doing in this space. So I'm really looking forward to what all we have to present. From the government side this morning, if all of you weren't present, there were talks of 10 tribal museums, 30 maritime museums, several state museums. So all of this is extremely exciting to hear. So yeah, really, really looking forward to the next 10, 15 years.
Good, Ethan?
Yeah, in terms of what museums can be like in the future, so we're living in the information age. There was a time where people went to museums for information. You can get that on the internet now. I think museums will have to offer that material experience and that social experience that you can't get on the internet. So I think those are some of the, at least in my opinion, items that can be additive.
So I think you could also talk about some international best practices in the museum space that you've seen or to quote.
The two words that I really yearn for, one is ownership and participation, where you go into the museum and you feel this is my object, this is my story. It's not a space where I've just gone to learn something, but it's I'm feeling like this is my space, and that's that connection. It's multisensory, it's emotional, it's history, and if we can just I don't know if that's even a word, but de-hierarchize museums a little bit. Yes, democratize it a little bit. Little people, small people, their stories are amazing too.
Anjali?
So I've been listening to everyone, and I think my takeaway from here is each one of us have done something radical in their life, and I think if this is what a very small portion of India represents, I can't even imagine what the billions of people outside can do. So the scope is definitely huge when it comes to museums. Next, I feel that we need to start looking beyond the ordinary and beyond the immediate. And we all have done that. I think if we find inspiration from something which is not just local and remote to us, but go a little bit further, like Choiti mentioned, getting the people who don't have the access, get them involved. Let's celebrate the diversity that we have, and I think we have a humongous opportunity for progress in this field. Yes. Thank you.
Let's keep this going quick.
I'm speaking purely from a disability perspective, so I look forward to the day in which there is some equivalence where a person who's disabled has at least an equivalent experience as a non-disabled person in any place of learning, engagement, experience, etc.
Thank you.
I actually have nothing to add. Everything everybody is saying, I agree with all of them. Except that when you start building a museum, it takes 10 years for it to finish. We're already in the future. So, I mean, by the time...
So we're already in the future. That's a profound statement. All of you.
What I understand from my work till now, including this project, is that India got museums from the colonial superpowers, and we need to re-look at the laws and the regulations and the policies that govern museums, most of which are still the ones that the British laid down for us, where they used museums to educate us natives about the good things that we need to get out of the dark ages, kind of a thing. So we need to modernize our laws, especially we have too many government agencies, central, state, ASI state, etc.
Just remember that.
And the second thing is that we need a funding agency. for projects like us, we badly need that, which we don't have in India, because we're still following the colonial definition of a museum. And work like ours, thank you for calling it radical, makes us feel very much respected, but we badly need funding.
I was on a UNESCO panel last week and we talked about funding. And even if funding is available, we don't know where it's available. There are pockets. But what happens in the West, and I remember when I was in New York, I applied, there was an NEA grant, National Endowment of the Arts. They actually had workshops. I did a workshop to learn how to fill a grant for a non-profit that was helping out. But that said, I mean, the Museum Expo is something that is actually going to help the museums of the future. So for all you know me, I actually start my panel with some fun quotes, for stats and quotes. I've not used the quotes because of the timing and the number of people on the panel, but I end it with a rapid fire round. So, and you're just supposed to say one word or two words. So what is the first, this is not like coffee with Karan, so before you all say it, what is the first thought that comes to your mind when I say the word transcending boundaries? Start with okay. One word. 2 words. You don't have mics? Shout.
It would be inclusion and diversity.
Wonderful. Monica? Transcending boundaries.
Yeah, in our case it would be just not thinking in terms of modern nation states when working with people.
Jyoti, this is supposed to be fast, guys. Rapid.
For some reason, I'm thinking farmer.
Wonderful. We all need food. True. Farming museum. They talked about, I think, an agriculture museum. Did they? I think they did.
Well, for me, it would be expanding the mindset.
Wonderful.
360 degrees.
I'm going to say 2 things, the subcontinent and intergenerational.
Accessible and inclusive, of course, but also empowerment and empathy.
So now we've got our buzzwords for what the museums of the future need to look like. So thank you. Now we have time. I think we have about, before I get thrown out from the stage, we have about 7 minutes left. Right, good timing. Any questions from the audience? Okay, we all go for happy hour. No? Speechless? Wonderful. Thank you to our panel. I mean, such an exciting conversation. Thank you for listening to me, at least for this part, and sticking to the time I requested you all. 7 strong voices, all strong. I think this is, I've been a token male put on the panel, but thank you for all those insights of sharing and looking at the museums of the future, and congratulations on all the wonderful work you guys are doing, and keep it up. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.